All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at helping users who've forgotten their password recover their account. So let's say we have our user, and let's say they can't remember their password. So they would just click on the forgot password link, and they're going to be prompted to enter their email address. And then we're going to go ahead and just hit the send button, and this is going to send an email to that email address if it exists and are registered with our website. We're going to go over our email account. We're going to see, hey, look, we have a recovery email. We're going to look at that, and now we have our HTML link right here. It says change password. And as you can see at the bottom, it says https www.mysite.com/forgetpassword. So if they click on this, this is going to allow them to recover their account. Now, I'm just running this on localhost. I didn't want to push up to the website. First thing you're going to notice is that it's www.mysite.com instead of localhost. I can't use for just demonstration. I can't just use localhost because an email service like this is going to see that and say, "Hey, why are you trying to run a local server? That seems kind of suspicious." But anyway, if like you can see here, if I just put in mysite.com or an actual site, it's going to go ahead and work. So anyway, with using this method, notice that we have some URL parameters. So let me just copy those. And we'll take a look at that. Like I said, we're going to change that to local host when we actually run it. If we have it on the web, up on the web, obviously it just runs as it would be. Because if they saw this, yes, that would look suspicious. But anyway, since we're going to be using URL parameters for our authentication info, I want to make sure we're using HTTPS for our website. If you're not using that, you'd want to use maybe the method that we used in one of the previous videos, where we're just using a code and they can copy and paste that code into a form and they can authenticate their website that way. It wouldn't hurt. There are some websites where you can do it both ways. I think Facebook does it, for instance. Anyway, make sure, you're using HTTPS if you're using this method, so that way, someone can't steal this information. Anyway, we're going to have, we have our question mark saying, hey, we have our URL parameters, and here's our first key value pair. Right there. U is for user, and our user is Thomas. And EVBW, and that's kind of short, email verification password. And here is the value, which is our password. So anyway, let me go ahead and grab this, and we're just going to simulate as if we just clicked it in our email. So like I said, if I click this, I have it as mysite.com. I can't put localhost like I'm running it right now because this email client's going to see that as suspicious. So I'm going to go back to here and paste that in. Go. There we go. Now we're going to be prompted to create our new password. I entered those the same. Yeah, why not? Password successfully updated. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. Go over to our code. And one thing to be aware of when we're creating our connection for our database, on here, our connection is going to look much the same as a lot of the other ones, but I'm also going to add this parameter here for parse time equal to true. I'm going to have a time limit for which they can use this email verification password. So I want to be able to just dump that into and use the Golang time.time data type. So if you want to use the time.time data type, go ahead and make sure you have this parameter there. Okay, and just kind of a quick rundown before we dive deeper in. When they, on the index.html page, when they click the forgot change password link, it's at the forgot pw path. That's going to run our forget password handler. And this one's just going to render that form where you could enter that email address. And next, when they hit submit on that email address, it's when they hit the submit button, it's going to run the forget password validation path. And as we could go down to here, that's going to run our forget password validation handler. And this is going to validate the email address and send the email. Now, why are we validating this email address? Well, we're sending emails. We want to make sure we're not sending emails to people who aren't with our website. So we're going to check to make sure that, yes, they're registered with our website. And if they're not, we're not going to send that email address because we want to make sure we uphold our reputation. We don't want to get labeled spam over time. We want to make sure we're only sending emails to people who want them. And so this is going to go ahead and create this email and send that email with that hyperlink in it. When they click that hyperlink, it's at /forget password change, and it's also going to have that URL information in there. So it's going to go ahead and put this into our change password form where it had the two different password fields, one for password and confirm password. Okay, one thing I forgot. When we sent the email, it directs us to this one, just saying, hey, go ahead and check your email account, check your email. And it tells you like, hey, if you don't find something, please check the email address was entered correctly. Yeah, and try again. And like I said, we're giving them a 45-minute window. And if you want to, obviously you can increase that window however you see fit. So like I said, when they hit the click the hyperlink in the email, it's going to go ahead and run the handler that presents this form. So we're going to have two different passwords. We want to make sure those are both the same. And when they hit submit, that's going to be at the /forget email password, forget password email verification handler. And it's tacking on that URL information, that authentication info that we're going to be inserting. Anyway, it's going to go ahead and run this handler, which is going to verify the user's information and that they do have access to that email address, and it will change that password if they do. Let's go ahead and take a look at our database real quick. Of course, we have our users table, which of course has a username, our email, and our password hash. Now we also have our email verification hash table, and again, this one has a different hash. So we're going to have two different passwords in essence. So we still have the one where the user can log in regularly. If they forget that one, we can send them the password, and update this hash. So that way, if they have access to that email account, they can still, recover their account. And of course, we have a timeout period. In this video, we're just, if it exists and they're registered with us, we're just sending that account. Wouldn't hurt to have, for different processes like this, to have a CAPTCHA or some security questions to just keep the bots from trying to spam across your site. Now, as you notice, like, well, why can't we just send them the hash from this other one? Well, the reason that we have two of these is that we still want the user to be able to log in with their regular password, because we don't, when someone goes through that process, puts in that email address, it could be just a hacker who knows their email address, and we don't want to get a denial of service attack where that user wouldn't be able to use their service, just because someone else went through the forgot password process, and put in their email address. So you could still get in either way still. Anyway, let's go back to our code. So let's say someone's at the index page and they click that link for forgot password validation. I'm going to go ahead and just go to that definition. And so we're going to go ahead and parse our form, grab that email. And we created this data type called template data because we're going to be passing in different types of different things to our templates. Let me just go to the definition to show this data type that we created up here. We have our template data struct. This is our data type that we've created, and we can pass in different information: username, email, authentication info. If there's an error message, they fill out the form incorrectly, say the passwords didn't match or something like that, we can pass that information back, or just a general message we want to pass to the user. Let me go back to that definition. Okay, so anyway, this one just renders the form so they can enter that email address. When they hit submit, we'll run this forgot password validation handler, which is going to validate that we have that email address registered with us, so we're not just sending emails to people that we shouldn't, run our reputation. Like I said, we're going to create an error message that says, sorry, there was an issue recovering an account. Please try again. We're going to go ahead and begin a transaction. So either everything in the database is going to be updated successfully, or it's going to roll everything back and it'll be, or else it'll be unchanged. And we're going to check to make sure, we're just checking to make sure that, hey, this transaction is being created or began successfully. So if it's not, we're just going to run rollback and get just being a little precautious here. Let's say if there was an error with rollback, it'll save to here, and then we're going to check if the error is not equal to nil. So if everything's good, it's going to be nil, but if there is an error, we're just printing like, hey, there was an error, and then we're going to send them back to the forgot password.html and pass in our error message from up here, just so they can try again. But anyway, just being extra cautious, and that way, in actuality, you would be logging those type of errors, and this is just more for educational purposes, so that way people can follow along and learn the process. Anyway, we're going to use defer for our rollback, just in case if there's not a commit somewhere, then it's going to go ahead and just roll back. And we're creating our username variable, and we're going to run db.queryRow, and we're just checking to make sure that they have an email address with us. If they do not, we're not going to send one, because then it could just be someone trying to ruin our email reputation. So anyway, we're going to check to see if we find them, and we're going to scan the email and the username. And if the error is not equal to nil, then we're going to go ahead and handle that error. We're going to roll everything back, and then we're going to send them back to the forgot password email.html, and pass in our TD variable, short for template data. And like I said, it has that particular error saying right up here, sorry, there was an issue recovering the account, please try again. Now you might be saying, hey, this username, or I'm sorry, this email address doesn't exist, and that's the error that we're getting. Why wouldn't we tell the user, like, hey, you entered your email address incorrectly? And so this is a little discussion talking about enumeration. So a lot of hackers will try and create lists as much with as much information that they're not supposed to have as possible. There's a couple different things. Say like a username is, you could see a post from somebody, you can see their username. That's public facing. We're not real concerned if someone creates a list of that. The bots are probably scraping that off the blog anyway. But other information the user will want to keep private, and we don't want to just give out a list of all of our users' email addresses. So so we keep this specifically vague, whether they have an email address or they don't. We're going to pass on, hey, there was an issue recovering this account. We want to keep that vague because we don't want to give any kind of confirmation to the hackers who are running some bot or manually running through this, just trying to collect email addresses or check if a particular email address is registered to our website. Because once they know that, they can use it to target that, or maybe they'll sell the email address and then all these people get put on a spam list. So we don't want that. So it may seem kind of a pain to the user experience, but we don't just want to give away email addresses, phone numbers, or anything like that. Just if it's not public facing like a username, we're going to try and protect it. So that's for the vagueness of the particular message that we were passing in there. So if we go to the forgot password, that's why would be passing in something so vague. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and if that email does exist, we're going to go ahead and continue with the process. We're going to go ahead and create, figure out what time it is right now, and then we're going to use the method add, and we use time.minutes times 45. So we're going to add 45 minutes to this. So this is going to create a timeout. So if someone's going to, they forgot their password, they have 45 minutes to go ahead and recover that account. Now, in our database here, like I said, we have a hash for the user's password, and we also have a hash. We have a hash for the user's password, and then we have this other table, email verification hash, which is a password that we create specifically for recovering their account via the email address. So this table is being used to verify that person does indeed have access to the email address they say they have access to. And we don't have to settle for a simple, semi-easy to predict password or password that's been compromised somewhere else. We can create our own password to be on the extra safe side. And of course we have our timeout as well. So to create this, we're going to create, something more random and longer and more difficult, to guess than obviously a regular user's password. So alphanum runes is just short, for alphanumeric runes. So we got our lowercase letters, our uppercase letters, and our digits. So, rune, which is alias for int32, but it's when we're in reference to, letters. And we don't have a character data type in this language. So talking about runes, we're talking about these, different possible letters. And we're going to create a email verification random rune. So we want to create a slice of rune that is 64 long, and we want to make sure we're grabbing just random letters or numbers out of this. So we're going to create a loop here, and our for loop is going to go through this 64 times. So it's going to start at 0, this will run at 0, and then it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to 63, and that will run. Obviously 64 is not going to be less than 64, so that iteration won't run. So 0 through 63 it'll run, means it's going to run 64 times. And of course, like I said, it's incrementing each time. And so each one of these times we're going to be going through, and we're going to go ahead and save a new value to each one of those indexes. So like I said, the first time it's going to save to index 0, then it's going to index 1, 2, 3, 4, and eventually index 63, and then it would be done. So we wouldn't want it to run 64 because we don't have, because indexes start at 0, in the last one we would use would be 63. We put in 64, it's going to be out of range. We don't have, this one wasn't created large enough for that. Anyway, we're going to be grabbing values out of this alphanumeric runes variable, and we want to just randomly grab any one of these. So to do this, we want to use our random package with the int in, which is going to pull a value. It's either going to be anywhere from 0 to whatever other number we put in there. So we could just put the number, I guess we could just put the number 63 in there, but this does the same thing in case you didn't actually count how many are in there. We can just find the length of it, which is 64 minus 1 gives us the 63. Again, being that this is index 0 and this is index 63. You got to make sure you have this -1, because if you have a 64 and when it randomly actually hits 64, then it would be out of range, because we don't have an index 64. We have an index 63. But anyway, like I said, we're going to be randomly grabbing a letter or a number out of this each time, and we're going to be placing it to each one of those indexes. Then we're going to print that off. Okay, let's see. Where are we at? Just trying to find my spot here. Okay, forgot password validation handler. So we print off our email address, and then we're printing off, change password, email verification random rune that we had just changed all the different letters in there. Remember, rune is an alias for int32, so these are just different int32 numbers that correspond to different letters on UTF-8. So each one of these, if we could turn it back to a letter, which we actually do right here. So we're going to go ahead and turn this back to a string, save it to email verification password. And as you can see, we printed it right here. We've created our password, and it's longer and more random than what the user would have created on their own. And just for good measure, just showing that, hey, this is 64, 64 long. And if we go ahead and continue here, we're going to make our email verification hash. So we have our email verification password. This is what we're going to send in our email through the URL parameters. Now, the email verification hash is what we're going to save in our database. Remember, we still want to use hashes, because if someone was to get in and steal information, some way from our database, we wouldn't want to give them easy passwords to be able to log in. Just make it a little more difficult for them. Anyway, so this is what we're going to save into our database. We're going to use bcrypt to create this. So we're use bcrypt, the generate from password. So we need our email verification. So we have our password, as a slice of byte, and then we're just going to use the bcrypt default cost, which should be sufficient unless you have a government state trying to hack your stuff. Or someone going to use quantum computers on your stuff later. You're probably going to be fine with just the default. But you can always make that hash more difficult by increasing that number. And we're going to check if there was an error. If there was an error, we're going to go ahead and handle that. Roll back and send people back to the forget password.html page, passing in that error. But if everything's good so far, we're going to go ahead and create our update email verification statement. That's our MySQL statement. We're going to go ahead and prepare that. We're going to check to see if there's an error. Like I said, we're going to handle that if there is an error. And we're going to defer close that statement. And now we have our email verification, our email verification password hash, which we're going to save in the database. Now, we're changing this to a string. You might say, hey, why would we want to do that? Well, if we look in our database, email verification hash table, we look at our hash here, you see these little $signs here can tell us a little bit about our hash. Let me pull that up. So I'm just at bcrypt on Wikipedia, and bcrypt is a password hashing function. So by looking at it this way, we can determine, we can see a little bit about it. You can know about which algorithms being used, the particular cost that's being used. There's a salt, and a hash. It's just a little bit easier to, look at it, that way. So that's why we went in and switched it to that. Anyway, let's go back to our code. And we want to go ahead and capture our results. So we're going to go ahead and update, and so we're going to pass in email verification password hash, as a string, so that way, we can look. It looks a little prettier, and we can understand what we're looking at a little easier. Our timeout as well as our email. So we're updating that table. We're setting the hash to something, the timeout to something, where the email is equal to that email that we're passing in. So it's going to return an error, and we're going to go ahead and check to see the rows affected. So we expect the error to be equal to nil and the rows affected to be equal to 1. So down here, we're checking to make sure, hey, it better be equal to nil. So if it's not equal to nil, or if the rows affected is not equal to 1, well, then we know we have a problem. And we're going to go ahead and roll back changes, and then we're going to go ahead and send them back, to the forgot password page, and we're going to give them that error message. Okay, but if everything does go as expected, we're going to go ahead and send our email, and we're just using the environmental, grabbing it from an environmental variable, just a regular email address, and our password for our SMTP server, which again, we're just pulling that using the OS package, to get it off our system variables. Two, we're just sending one email address. It uses a slice of string because, as you know, you could be sending an email to many people. But in this example, we're just sending one. Particular host I'm using is the Google one, and they use that 587 port, and our address is just simply the host, semicolon, and then the port. And our subject is the My Site account recovery. And here is the body that we're going to be sending. And as you can see, we have our A tag, and we're going to use target equal to blank because we want it just to go ahead and open up a new page instead of trying to render the page that they have their email service open on. And we have these backslashes here because this is one big long string, but we just want to make sure that they know, like, hey, this is not the end of the string. This is actual just double quotes. And like I said, you put the name of your website here. If your email service is like mine, if you put localhost here and then its port or whatever, it's going to see that as suspect, and it's going to change whatever you put into that hyperlink. It's probably like mine, it chopped off the URL parameters. So just a heads up on that. But if you use an actual website, I tried it with my own website, and it went ahead and worked. So anyway, and like I said, and sign means we're going to have URL parameters for the first key value pair. U is going to be username, and symbol means we got our next key value pair, which EVPW is, for us, is just short for email verification password. And we're going to tack that on as well. And then change password is just the text that we see inside that email. Now make sure you have the meme type set, and we want to make sure it knows this is text/HTML. If we do not set this, very likely it's just going to go ahead and render all of this as just raw text, and you're going to see, all of this part which you've written out. So we want this to be a hyperlink, so make sure that you have that in there. And yes, you do have to have our new lines, and our message is just going to be our subject, our meme, and our body. And then for the SMTP package, plain auth is just going to grab our authentication info. And then we're going to run from the SMTP package the send mail function. It's an address, authentication info, who we're sending it from, or who, we are our SMTP server. Who are we sending it to, which is the user, and then that message, which is the subject, the meme, and the body, all combined together. And we're going to check if there's an error. If there is an error, we're going to go ahead and handle the error and send them back with the message, and of course roll back changes. Now, if everything ran as expected, we're going to go ahead and run tx.commit, and this is going to make sure all of our changes stick in the database. If we didn't run this, that defer tx.rollback would execute, so we have to make sure we have this in our code, or else that defer statement would make it roll back every single time. We're just going to check to see if there's an error returned from running this commit. And if there is, we're going to go ahead and handle that. But if everything runs like we expect it to, we're going to go ahead and render the forgot password email.html page, which is just a simple message saying, hey, please check your email for account recovery. And it says if no email is received within a few minutes, we're just telling them, hey, make sure that you entered that correctly. And this is a enumeration, safety versus, like I said, enumeration safety, making sure people can't just harvest all of our email addresses versus how easy it is for the user. So this is just letting them know, like, hey, make sure you enter it correctly, because we don't want to just give away those email addresses. We want to protect those for the user. So the user will go to their email service. They'll find the email, and then they'll go ahead and click on the link as we were showing. So anyway, when they click that link, it's at /forget password change, and of course it has those URL parameters as well. This one's going to render the form here, which has our password and our confirmed password inputs on our form, and it's just going to render that form so that way we can attempt to help them change that password. On our TD variable on authentication info, we're going to be passing in that URL information. So when this comes in, we can still use r.form value, and it'll grab the URL parameters. Just like a get request. But anyway, we're just going to go ahead and save that data into td.authentication info. So when we pass in td, it's going to go ahead and tack that authentication info as URL parameters onto the end of that path. So when they hit submit, it's going to have the action of going at that path with that URL parameter info that we're passing in. So that has our email verification password as well as our username. Let's go back to main. So when they click submit, it's going to run forgot email password verification path, which runs this forgot password verification handler. And we're going to use our form to grab a couple different values. So in the form itself, we saw the inputs for password and confirm password. We're grabbing both of those. But up in the path, we also have our user authentication info, which, remember, one of those key value pairs was you and the other one's EVPW. And we're just, so we can grab both of them using this r.form value. So it's going to grab stuff out of the URL parameters, and it's also going to grab stuff that's down there in the form. And we're just, printing those just for demonstration purposes. And we're creating our variable TD, and our error message is, sorry, there was an issue recovering an account. Please try again. And we're going to go ahead and create our authentication info in case we need to pass that as well. Now, we're just checking to see if the passwords are the same, if they didn't make an error entering those. Now, you want to make sure you do this on JavaScript as well. That way, you actually don't want to go ahead and offload some of that extra work. So if they don't enter them correctly, you want them, the form not to submit. You want them to go ahead and recheck their passwords and re-enter it. So that way, we don't have to be hitting the server with a request when it can just be done on the client. It's going to be probably a little quicker anyway. So if those two are the same, then we're going to go ahead and begin our transaction and check to see if there's an error, handle it if there is. And we run defer.rollback. And like I said earlier, we have to have a tx.commit or else it is going to roll back. And I named this variable DB email verification hash, and just the DB on there just so someone reading can understand, like, okay, this is coming from the database. And we have our timeout as well. And like I said, when we create our connection with MySQL, we want to use time.time. So you gotta make sure you have that URL parameter we were talking about prior. And we're going to use db.query, and we're going to select verification hash and timeout from the email verification hash table where the username is equal to that username that we got, those URL parameters we passed in. And we're going to go ahead and scan for db.email verification hash and timeout. If there's an error, we're going to go ahead and handle that error through here. And now we want the current time because we need to compare this versus the timeout time. So we're just running time.now to get the current time. And then we're going to use current time dot after. So, you know, it has, so we have current time and we're running the method after, as you can see as the function signature here. It's also going to take another time variable, and it's going to return a true or false. And after reports whether the time instant t is after you. So is current time after timeout time? If it is, and it returns true, well, we have a problem. We're past our timeout time. So then it's going to go ahead, you know, and run this piece of code here. We'll send them back to the forgot password.html. You know, let them know the error. And then we're going to go ahead and roll back. Now, the reason we're going back to this one is that we've passed our time, so they need to start back at this part of the process again, if indeed that is their email address. And let's go ahead and continue. We're going to go ahead and check if the database verification hash is the same as the hash of the email verification password. So that email verification password that we got, you know, through that URL parameters and the link that they clicked on in their email, want to make sure that coincides with that hash that we pulled from our database. So take our slice of byte of our database email verification hash, the one we pulled from our database, and we're going to see if, you know, this is going to return true, to see if it coincides with the email verification password. And if it does not, we're just simply going to go ahead and, you know, we're going to roll back some changes, and we're also going to send them back to forgot password.html. Actually, I probably should put this up here just in case it fails. And we're just giving a message saying, hey, database email verification hash and hash of email verification password are the same. That's just saying, hey, you know, there was no error, just letting ourselves know here. And so now we're going to be in the process of saving that new password into the database. We still want to, just like with registration, we want to make sure it checks all of our password criteria. So in a previous video, we've went ahead and covered our password criteria. I'm not going to cover this here, but go ahead and check that if you're interested. And so we're going to check to see if the check password criteria is, if this password that they've passed in is correct, or sorry, passes all those criteria, and we don't return an error, and everything would be good. But if there is, but let's say they give us a password and it doesn't pass all the criteria, again, we're going to grab all of our authentication info, and then we're going to go ahead and execute our email recovery password.html. Oh, that's the wrong name. Sorry. Let's see, and this one's from the error from, okay, sorry, password change. There we go. So that would send them back to here with the authentication info in here, so they get another chance to put in that password information again. Sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and, but if the password passes all the criteria, we're going to go ahead and create a hash that we can put into the database. So we use bcrypt.generatePassword, and we're going to take that user's password and we're going to use just the default cost. If there's an error, we're going to go ahead and handle that error. And we're going to update the database with the new user password, hash. So we're going to go ahead and update users, and we're going to set the hash in there, which is created from their password. So we're going to go ahead and change this. Oops. Where the username is equal to that username that we have. And we're going to update. So we're going to go ahead and prepare that statement, handle it if there was an error preparing that statement. Use defer update hash statement.close. And then we create a variable result for SQL.result. So we want to make sure we have this number of results that we expect. So update hash statement.execute. We're going to pass in that hash and that username, and we want to make sure that the rows affected is what we expect it to be. So we want to make sure that there is no error. We want to make sure error is equal to nil, and we also want to make sure that we only affect one row. If any of those trigger, then we want to make sure that we go ahead and handle that error and we roll back the changes. Now, everything runs good, then we want to go ahead and commit our transaction and go ahead and check if there was that error and let ourselves know if there was that error. And then just a message to ourselves, forgotten password has been reset. td.message, password successfully updated. So if we go back, that's been passed in here for a td variable for our template data. And that's where this password successfully updated came from. All right. A lot of little things to go over there, but hopefully that's not too terribly hard to follow. Tried to create the, I know the variables were a little bit lengthy, but that's so they're a little bit easier to distinguish between the different parts or where we are in the process. But anyway, this allows the users, should they forget their password, another way to get in. And by using our own password hash for verifying they have access to that email address, we don't have to settle for a really simple, easy, predictable password, say like a user would create. And also we can still have this process while protecting from enumeration. We don't have to give any feedback that the hackers could use to figure out what all of our email addresses are and steal that information from our users. One of the nice things about using that TD variable that we're using is that when we save an error message at the top, that's going to be passed into those templates. Well, we can go ahead and just use that same one, because if I accidentally write the text slightly different, the hacker may be able to figure out, like, okay, one of these is for when the email does exist or doesn't exist, and just through their own testing by registering one of their own known emails, they can kind of figure out, versus an email address they know that doesn't exist, they could figure out the difference if those texts aren't identical. Kind of a pain, but by doing it this way, I'm not going to accidentally write it incorrectly. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my database again here. So if you hadn't created these tables yet, here's the information for that. Primary key, non-nulls, uniques, all that, auto increment, all that business. So just go ahead and pause the video if you want those. But anyway, I hope that was helpful. Hopefully that was useful. Like I said, we'll have to add some CAPTCHA or security questions down the line to protect against automated bot attacks. But anyway, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Really does help me out, and it is greatly appreciated. You guys have a good one.